This is an interesting little statistic, and it may have no bearing on 2012 because I'm kind of thinking of a reason why it might be the opposite of what the statistics show in the past. But it says that silver was up only in 5 out of the last 23 presidential elections. Only up in 5 out of 23. And it was only up more than 5% in only 2 out of 23. So practically every time it was down, and even a few times it was up, it wasn't up by much. Then there's another little factoid out here. Well, anyway, just looking back at the elections, 1920 was down 51%. 1924 was one of those years it was up 5%. 28 down 2%, 32 down 17%, 36 down, same price. And then, we get up more modern times, 1980 down 44% from its high of 1979, 1984, 30%. And, well, I'm going to comment why I think this is. 2004 was one of the exceptional years, up 15%. Now, the big question is what's going to happen in 2012. But it says there were only 4 election years when silver started the year at twice its trend line. 1920, 1980, 1984, and 2012. Silver's performance in the first 3 of those election years was minus 51% in 1920, minus 44% in 1980, and minus 30% in 1984. So, makes you wonder about 2012. But, you know what I think? I think part of the reason might be because, well, the Federal Reserve was around since all these election years, right? And if anybody wants to manipulate the economy and keep commodity prices down in an election year, that's usually good for the incumbent, and that may be why. I don't know. That could be why, because this doesn't make sense why it would be an election year, but it may be because you want to keep prices for things that people use like commodities, gasoline, food, whatever, keep the price of agriculture down during election year so you get reelected. That might have something to do with it too. And you notice the Federal Reserve was in power for all these years. So, and I think that is a policy of the Obama administration, to try to keep the gasoline prices down. But maybe there's people who want to get them out of there, and they're going to go ahead and raise the gas prices. And that might, well, because it's a little factoid also that when you have oil takes off in a very hard bull run, a lot of times it's because of tensions in the Middle East. The uncertainty causes a lot more people to run into gold, and then the correlation between oil and silver gets a lot stronger. So this might be an exception, and you remember there are 2 election years where there is an exception. But it's an interesting little factoid. I think silver is going to be bearish in the near term, and that's why I'm shorting it right now. But I've been noticing it's having a little bit of a bounce, probably. Difficult to say. And, looking at these charts again, well, I don't like the technicals too much. Sometimes I think they're worth looking at, like as a casual thing, and putting a lot of stuff together. Fundamentals, technicals, plus obviously what moves stuff on a day-to-day basis is news stories. And if you could be the first one, if you knew the news story before everybody else, that would be a nice thing, called inside trading. But I don't know nothing, right? Anyway, this is something, maybe there might be a little bit of a trend reversal here, as a little mental exercise, because I don't know, I think eventually in a few years, maybe before the next election, right? If this is election cycle, silver goes down, the next election is 2016. And it does seem to take, like 2008 to 2011, 3 years. 2004, about 4 years. That was the only one of the exceptions when silver was up in an election. Well, maybe it'll be 2015, and that makes about the right timing. where we're going to see silver hit another high, and maybe that will be the blow off top. Maybe it'll just be a few years away where silver goes to $800 an ounce or something in inflationary dollars, but I'll still take it. This is something interesting because you're looking at in this very short term. This is basically for 24 hours represented here. It's a 2-hour chart, and this could actually be considered a bullish hammer. So maybe it'll reverse, but somehow I don't think so. So much for technicals, but if you're looking at this right off of the public information here, bullish hammer, you got a descending trend line, and all of a sudden you have this hammer, it's a little hammerhead. The stem's got to be at least twice as long as the hammerhead. Usually that means a reversal in direction, reliability moderate. I usually don't look at things that have reliability. I like the ones that say reliability strong, and then you start figuring if there's something else why that could be. Well, then you start saying it's legit if you combine that with some other things. So, usually it's not supposed to have a little thing on the top. It can have a small one, but if this tail is twice as long as the body, it's going in a descending thing. That means it could reverse, right? Well, I don't know. I don't have too much faith in that, but I would like to know. It's one thing that bugs me about technicals. How do you know when it's going to do this? Was there any indication on one of these little bars that it was going to do this? No. You had to have a microphone in the CME meeting, and then you'd be fine. And I wonder if people do that, because I would sure like to know. But even when this happened, if people were not so starry-eyed too much about silver, and they were in the markets, they could have reversed, got out of their position immediately, and or maybe just could have hit stops, at this time. Maybe put the stops right about here. It would hit the stops and reverse position and went down, and shorted it. And there was an opportunity to do that. I just think a lot of people are just sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And hopefully 2012 is a good year, but historically it hasn't been, and that might be because people are, there might have been a tendency during election years to hold down commodity prices like oil and agriculture, and that would have maybe held back silver too, because in a way, when commodities go up in general, silver goes up also. And I think in 2012 we're going to have some very high gasoline prices and oil prices. That was in the Lindsey Williams prediction, but it seems pretty obvious with the tensions going on in the Middle East. So it may be an exception to the rule, and it might be 3 out of 24 election years that silver went up more than 5%. So, this might be an exceptional year in a lot of ways. Who knows?